He's been called the Pig. Giovanni Brusca, the Sicilian mob boss who committed one of the most unspeakable acts in criminal history, dissolving a TWEL-VEYEA-ROL D-boy in acid after holding him captive for over 2 years.
Alla fine ho visto due lacrime, sembrava un'eternità. Comunque è finito tutto, abbiamo messo dentro il bidone, abbiamo versato l'acido e la mattina abbiamo svuotato il tutto.
But that boy was just one victim in a massacre that claimed over 100 lives, including the car bomb assassination of Italy's greatest anti-Mafia prosecutor, Judge Giovanni Falcone. And here's what will make your blood boil. Today, in 2025, Giovanni Brusca is walking free. Not hiding in some underground bunker, not on the run from international authorities, pro-than, but legally free, protected by the very government whose judge he murdered, and paid by Italian taxpayers to live comfortably under a new identity.
Maggio del 2021 io ho dato la notizia che Brusca tornava libero.
The question tearing Italy apart isn't just how this happened, it's why society allows monsters to transform their evil into profit. Because while the families of his victims received nothing but endless grief, Giovanni Brusca has been rewarded with freedom, financial support, and government protection. The man who pressed the button that killed Judge Falcone is now benefiting from anti-mafia laws that Falcone himself helped create.
Giovanni Brusca per me ha rappresentato l'icona del male quando io ero a Palermo, perché Giovanni Brusca era quello che aveva premuto il telecomando della strage di Capaci, era quello che aveva gestito e dato del sequestro del piccolo Di Matteo e dato l'ordine di uccidere Giuseppe Di Matteo, ed era il responsabile, come poi scoprirò quando lo interrogherò e mi comincerà a confessare tutti gli omicidi che aveva commesso, il responsabile di tante decine di omicidi. Io me ne ha raccontati circa 200, non se ne ricordava più nemmeno quelli che aveva commesso.
This is the true story of how one man's unimaginable cruelty was ultimately transformed into his ticket to freedom.
Giovanni Brusca was born in San Giuseppe Iato in the province of Palermo on February 20, 1957 into a family already deeply rooted in mafia circles. He was the son of the boss Bernardo Brusca and brother of Emanuele and Enzo Salvatore, all men of honor of the San Giuseppe Iato family.
The 20th of February 1957. San Giuseppe Iato, Sicily. This wasn't just another birth. This was the arrival of a child into what can only be described as a criminal dynasty. Giovanni Brusca entered a world where violence wasn't just accepted, it was expected. This wasn't a good kid gone bad. This was a child systematically groomed for violence from infancy, molded by generations of organized crime into what would become one of history's most ruthless killers. His father, Bernardo Brusca, was a capomandamento, MAR, a district boss, who served multiple life sentences for homicides and died in prison in 2000, never once breaking the mafia's sacred code of silence. But the rot went even deeper. Brusca's grandfather and great-grandfather were both initiated members of the mafia, making Giovanni the product of multiple generations of organized crime. While other 5-year-olds were learning to tie their shoes, little Giovanni Brusca was visiting his father in prison and assisting mafia fugitives by delivering food, clothing, and cleaning hidden weapons. While other kindergartners were learning their ABCs, Giovanni was being indoctrinated into a world of violence and absolute loyalty to Cosa Nostra. The psychological conditioning was methodical. When young Giovanni's brother wanted to dress as a Coast Guard for a costume party, their father flew into a violent rage, ripping the costume apart and slapping the child to reject any association with law enforcement. The message was crystal clear. In the Brusca household, you were either with the mafia or you were the enemy.
At the age of just 13, the young Brusca was already acting as a liaison for important fugitives such as Bernardo Provenzano and Calogero Bagarella, bringing them food and essential information. He also provided the same service to Salvatore Todorina, when the latter was under the protection of the Bruscas during the clash with Stefano Bontate.
By 13, Giovanni Brusca was already serving as a messenger to some of the most dangerous men in Sicily. Names like Bernardo Provenzano and Salvatore Totò Riina, men who would go on to become legendary mafia bosses responsible for hundreds of deaths, were regular fixtures in young Giovanni's life. And here's a detail that reveals just how deep the Brusca family's criminal roots truly went. When prosecutor Alfonso Sabella arranged a meeting between the imprisoned father, Bernardo, and his now cooperating son, something extraordinary happened. Bernardo Brusca looked directly at the prosecutor and essentially confessed that the Mafia had been behind the Portella della Ginestra massacre in 1947 to one of the most notorious political killings in Italian history.
Entra Giovanni Brusca. Bernardo Brusca era seduto come sono seduto io ero seduto qua alla sua sinistra. Il figlio arriva di fronte, non si vedevano da 15 anni. Lui vede entrare il figlio, non lo guarda nemmeno in faccia, si gira verso di me, si appoggia sul tavolo per sollevarsi e mi fa: dottore, così, guarda me, ora mi vede vecchio e stanco, ma quando aveva 17 anni, quella montagna di Portella della Ginestra me la salevo e me le scendevo che era un piacere.
This was the man who raised Giovanni Brusca. This was the role model, the father figure, the standard to which young Giovanni was expected to aspire. The moment that sealed Giovanni Brusca's fate forever came when he was just 18 years old. He committed his first confirmed killing at age 18, followed by a second at 19, murders that served as his rite of passage for formal initiation into Cosa Nostra.
His formal entry into Cosa Nostra was sanctioned through the characteristic punchuta ceremony, the Mafia initiation ritual led by Totò Riina himself.
The initiation ceremony, USNI, called La Punziuta, was a blood oath that bound Giovanni Brusca to a life of violence, performed under the direct supervision of Totò Riina, a man who would later earn the nickname The Beast for his unprecedented brutality. Riina saw something special in young Giovanni, a seemingly limitless capacity for violence and an apparent enjoyment of the process itself.
Giovanni Brusca per me ha rappresentato l'icona del male quando io ero a Palermo, perché Giovanni Brusca era quello che aveva premuto il telecomando della strage di Capaci, era quello che aveva gestito e dato il sequestro del piccolo Di Matteo e dato l'ordine di uccidere Giuseppe Di Matteo, ed era il responsabile, come poi scoprirò quando lo interrogherò e mi comincerà a confessare tutti gli omicidi che aveva commesso, il responsabile di tante decine di omicidi. Me ne ha raccontati circa 200. Non se ne ricordava più nemmeno quelli che aveva commesso.
200 murders. So many killings that Brusca himself couldn't even remember most of his victims. Prosecutor Alfonso Sabella literally had to prepare a list and go through it systematically because the man had forgotten the majority of people he had murdered. This wasn't killing out of necessity, this was industrial-scale slaughter. When his father Bernardo was imprisoned in 1985, 28-year-old Giovanni assumed leadership of the San Giuseppe Giotto Mandamento, becoming one of Totò Riina's most trusted enforcers.
Brusca era in qualche modo l'erede di Leo Luca Bagarella al vertice dello schieramento corleonese di Cosa Nostra, ma lo era solo perché Matteo Messina Denaro si era mai fatto da parte. Però certo Brusca, dopo l'arresto di Leo Luca Bagarella e il passo indietro di Matteo Messina Denaro, diventa l'erede di quella strategia corleonese.
He earned nicknames that would chill the blood of even hardened criminals. Uveru, the pig, for his unkempt appearance and ruthless demeanor, and Iuscana Cristiani, the people slayer, for his extraordinary kill count. What truly set Giovanni Brusca apart was his method. This wasn't a man who simply executed victims with a quick bullet. His preferred method involved prolonged suffering, breaking victims' legs with hammers, using pliers to rip off ears, followed by slow strangulation with a thin nylon cord that could take up to 10 agonizing minutes. But even death wasn't enough. He pioneered lupara bianca, the practice of dissolving bodies in acid to prevent identification and burial, deliberately amplifying the psychological terror inflicted on victims' families.
During the 1980s, Giovanni Brusca rapidly rose through the ranks of the Mafia organization, distinguishing himself for his ferocity and his unconditional loyalty to Totò Riina, the undisputed leader of the Corleonesi. This faction, so called because it originated from the town of Corleone, imposed itself within Cosa Nostra during the Second Mafia War, physically eliminating representatives of the old Mafia guard.
During the Second Mafia War of 1981 to 1983, Brusca served as one of Rina's primary enforcers, operating within a death squad that systematically eliminated rival clans. This period saw over 1,000 deaths, as the Corleonese faction literally murdered their way to the top of Sicily's criminal hierarchy. But Brusca's bloodiest work was yet to come. In the early 1992s, the Sicilian Mafia would declare open war on the Italian state itself, and Giovanni Brusca would become their primary weapon. The man Giovanni Brusca was ordered to kill wasn't just any prosecutor that next time, he was Italy's greatest hope. Giovanni Falcone had done what many thought impossible. He had cracked the code of Cosa Nostra and built cases that were systematically dismantling the Sicilian Mafia's entire power structure.
Ma c'è una maggiore consapevolezza dell'importanza del problema, cioè della necessità di indagare sui rapporti tra mafia e politica, o meglio, tra mafia e una politica che in realtà è affarismo, ma che si siano fatti notevoli passi avanti per la recisione di questi fenomeni, credo proprio di no, anzi direi che
Falcone's investigations had led to the historic Maxi trial of 1986 to 1987, where over 300 mafiosi were convicted. But it was his collaboration with American authorities that really terrified the mafia. He was exposing international drug trafficking networks worth billions. When the Italian Supreme Court upheld the Maxi trial convictions on the 30th of January 1992, Rina declared all-out war on the Italian state. His weapon of choice? The man known as the Pig.
It was Brusca who actually pressed the button on the remote control that activated the explosive device placed in a drainage channel under the highway connecting the Palermo airport to the city center. Brusca's role in the attack was not limited to the final execution. He was also responsible for finding the explosives, organizing the extensive ambush for the attack and planning the execution phase of the crime, including the escape of the attackers.
The planning for the Capaci massacre was meticulous. Brusca's team acquired 200 kilograms of quarry explosives, later augmented with TNT, Semtex, and RDX. On May 8, 1992, they positioned 13 barrels containing between 400 to 500 kilograms of explosives in a drainage tunnel beneath the highway. They cleared obstructing foliage, positioned spotters along the entire route, and placed an old refrigerator on the side of the motorway as a visual signal. When Falcone's convoy passed it, that was the moment to detonate.
Quando Falcone andò a Roma non aveva più né elicottero, né autocivetta, né tantomeno le macchine che ci aprivano e chiudevano il corteo.
Totorrina, questo è uno dei grandi misteri. Richiama questo comando, dice loro di rientrare in Sicilia perché bisognava ammazzarlo quando lui rientrava tutti i fine settimana.
The 23rd of May 1992, 5:58 p.m. Giovanni Falcone and his wife Francesca Morvillo landed at Palermo's airport, returning from Rome in their unarmored Fiat Cromas. Giovanni Brusca was waiting on a hillside with binoculars and a remote detonator. As the three-car convoy proceeded along Highway A29, spotters relayed updates while Brusca watched. At exactly 5:58 p.m., as Judge Falcone's car passed the refrigerator marker, Giovanni Brusca pressed the button. The explosion was massive. The blast created a crater 15 meters deep, completely obliterating the lead security car and instantly killing all three bodyguards, Vito Schifani, Rocco DeSillo, and Antonio Montanaro. Falcone and his wife were violently ejected and died from their injuries. 23 others were wounded. The explosion's force registered on local seismographs, and witnesses described the scene as resembling a war zone. Giovanni Brusca had just committed one of the most shocking acts of terrorism in European history.
Giovanni Falcone took his final breath while he was in my arms. At that moment, I knew that for me, the meeting with death was close.
Just 57 days later, Paolo Borsellino and 5 escorts died in the Via D'Amelio bombing on the 19th of July 1992. While Brusca wasn't the one who pressed the button, his fingerprints were all over the operation. But instead of cowering, Italy fought back. More and more mafia members began cooperating with authorities, providing information that led to wave after wave of arrests. By January 1993, Toto Riina was arrested, leaving Brusca as one of the most powerful figures remaining. But rather than hiding, Brusca escalated the violence. In May and July 1993, Brusca orchestrated bombings on mainland Italy that killed 10 civilians and injured 71. The Via dei Giorgofili bombing in Florence killed an entire family of 4, including 2 young children, and damaged the world-famous Uffizi Gallery. But what he did next would reveal the true depths of his depravity.
The numerous crimes attributed to Giovanni Brusca, the one that has most shocked public opinion for its unspeakable cruelty is the kidnapping and murder of the young Giuseppe Di Matteo, son of the turncoat Santino Di Matteo. The boy was kidnapped on November 23, 1993, when he was just 12 years old, and held prisoner for over 700 days until January 11, 1996.
Santino Di Matteo had been one of Brusca's accomplices in the Falcone bombing, but after his arrest in 1993, he became a pentito. Brusca's response was to target Santino's innocent 12-year-old son Giuseppe.
Viene rapito il 23 novembre. Sono andate 3 o 2, non lo so di preciso quant'erano, vestiti di poliziotta e hanno invitato Giuseppe che doveva venire da me. Allora il bambino ha detto sì, vengo subito da mio padre.
On the 23rd of November 1993, men disguised as police officers approached Giuseppe at a riding stable in Palermo, luring him with the promise of seeing his father. The boy, who loved horses and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, went willingly. He had no idea he was walking into a nightmare that would last 779 days. The child was held in terrible conditions and eventually confined to an underground bunker. For over 2 years, this innocent boy suffered while his captors tried to pressure his father into silence. When it became clear Santino would not stop cooperating, Brusca gave the final order on January 11, 1996.
Quando Giovanni Brusca dà l'ordine a Monticciolo, gli dice allibertate del cagnoletto, liberati del cagnolino, uccidi il bambino praticamente. Monticciolo parte, insomma Brusca gli dice ma aspetta, dice prima di ammazzare il bambino, torna da mio fratello, fallo un attimo ragionare, vediamo.
Giuseppe was killed, and his body was dissolved in acid. Brusca later admitted the child had tears streaming down his face during his final moments. But Brusca had miscalculated. Rather than intimidating Pentiti into silence, Giuseppe's murder horrified the public. More mafia members began cooperating, providing information that led to unprecedented arrests. Brusca's terror campaign had accelerated the very process it was meant to stop. On May 20, 1996, after years of sophisticated surveillance, Italian police traced Brusca to a hideout in Canatello, near Agrigento.
Localizziamo le celle, sono in provincia d'Agrigento a San Leone. Solo che non riusciamo a restringere il campo. Il margine d'errore che avevamo superava il 1,5 chilometri quadrato. Per cui cerchiamo di restringere sto margine. Non potevamo
The final confirmation came through an ingenious tactic. A plainclothes officer on a motorcycle with a deliberately faulty loud muffler circled suspected villas during monitored phone calls, allowing police to verify Brusca's location through audio bleeding into wiretapped conversations.
Domani sera alle 8 di sera prepariamo un poliziotto su una moto smarmittata nella zona di San Leone. Quando Brusca comincia a parlare, lui ha l'ordine, collegato via radio col casco, con le cuffie, con la centrale, ha l'ordine di muoversi.
Around 9 p.m., officers stormed the villa, finding Brusca unarmed and watching television, FTM. Ironically, a film about Giovanni Falcone, the most feared killer in Italy, offered no resistance.
Savina, che è il capo della mobile, sul cellulare, dico Gigi, come sento dall'altra parte un bestemmione di Savina e poi sento qualche botta che porta, l'abbiamo preso. A quel punto io ho cominciato a piangere come non avevo mai pianto in vita mia, dalla commozione, dalla gioia, dalla liberazione, un pianto di liberazione.
4 days after his arrest, on May 23rd, NDDC, exactly 4 years after the Capaci bombing, prosecutor Sabella received a cryptic phone call. Giovanni Brusca wanted to cooperate. The pig was ready to break omertà.
Il primo pensiero è il cervello che fa gli brutti scherzi. È stato, ma se questo inizia a collaborare, io lo dovrò interrogare più volte. E interrogandolo, gli dovrò stringere la mano. Io non lo so, mi sono sembrati momenti interminabili. Mi sono riseduto perché avevo risposto in piedi, mi sono seduto sulla poltrona. Mi sono sembrati veramente, forse sono passati pochi secondi, però io ho un ricordo di un tempo e non sapevo cosa fare, perché l'idea di stringere la mano a Brusca, di avere un rapporto quotidiano con lui, perché poi così sarebbe stato per un lungo periodo della mia vita, mi angosciava tantissimo. Quando Brusca entra io ho il momento perché sapevo che al di là del momento iniziale in cui Caselli e Loforte, procuratore della Repubblica e procuratore aggiunto, poi dovevo essere io a assorbirmi la collaborazione di Brusca, quindi in quel momento io la mano gliel'ho stretta. Vedi, l'uomo Alfonso Sabella quella mano non l'avrebbe mai voluto stringere. Il magistrato Alfonso Sabella quella mano l'ha stretta e ha fatto bene a stringerla, perché stringendo quella mano siamo riusciti veramente a ottenere grandi risultati.
Brusca's cooperation proved extraordinarily valuable. His testimonies revealed details about the Capaci bombing and exposed broader mafia operations. His information led to life sentences for Totò Riina and 23 other top bosses in the 1997 Falcone murder trial. His information even enabled the arrest of Bernardo Provenzano in 2006 after 4 decades on the run. But here's the controversy. Under Italian law, legislation that Giovanni Falcone himself helped create, Brusca's cooperation reduced his multiple life sentences to just 26 years. The man who murdered Falcone was benefiting from laws Falcone created. When Brusca was released on parole on the 31st of May 2021, after serving 25 years, the reaction was fury.
Nel maggio del 2021 io ho dato la notizia che Brusca tornava libero con qualche restrizione, che era la sorveglianza speciale, per cui per 4 anni Brusca è stato sotto una specie di sorveglianza che è scaduta il 31 maggio del 2025. Ritornato però uomo libero, totalmente libero, quindi è possibile che
Tina Montanaro, widow of bodyguard Antonio Montanaro, expressed outrage. The state is against us. After 29 years, we still don't know the truth, and Giovanni Brusca, the man who destroyed my family, is free. But the most shocking aspect wasn't just his freedom, it was how well the Italian state treats him.
Brusca is a millionaire. Brusca comes to enjoy the millions of euros.
As a protected witness, Giovanni Brusca receives a monthly stipend of £1,000 to £1,500, a new identity, and relocation to a secret location with security protection.
The thing, what pisses me off, is that Brusca is not going back free, as some say, who will now have those $1,000 or $1,500 a month if he doesn't find a job. Brusca is a millionaire. Brusca comes to enjoy the millions of euros.
On the 4th of June 2025, Brusca's probation officially ended, granting him complete freedom at age 68.
This law on collaborators was wanted by Giovanni Falcone, and thanks to his law we were able to exterminate the Mafia Dome of Riina, Provenzano Messina Denaro.
Giuseppe Di Matteo's family received $2.2 million in restitution in 2018, but no money can restore a murdered child.
Grazie a questa opportunità di poter chiedere scusa, perdono a tutti i familiari delle vittime, a cui ho creato tanto dolore e tanto dispiacere. Ho cercato di dare il mio contributo il più possibile e dare un minimo di spiegazione ai tanti che cercano verità e giustizia. E chiedo scusa principalmente a mio figlio e a mia moglie.
And that is the most chilling aspect of Giovanni Brusca's story. Not just what he did, but what he ultimately transformed it into: complete freedom